This story is titled, My Ex Left Me and Our Kids with a Note Saying, I'll Be Back in a Few Years. Returns 6 years later to find I have divorced her. Hey everyone! Before we jump into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed the channel is losing some traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can support us. It's quick, free, and it helps us keep bringing you awesome content. Your support means the world. Let's keep this channel growing together. Thanks so much. Now let's start the video. Alright, here's my story. I've been sitting on this for a while, but maybe putting it out there will help me make sense of it. My name's Jake, male, and my ex-wife, Lisa, female, and I have known each other for 11 years. We met in high school. She was my first everything. We got married after graduation, thinking we'd figure out life together. Turns out, Lisa had a very different idea of what figuring it out meant. At first, it was great. We had 2 amazing kids, a boy and a girl, and I thought we were solid. Sure, Lisa always had a taste for the finer things, but I chalked it up to her wanting the best for our family. That's what you do, right? You justify it because you love them. But somewhere along the way, it stopped being about us and started being about her. Then I noticed Lisa changing bit by bit. She started hanging out with this new group of high-class moms from school. You know the type. Always decked out in designer gear, talking about vacations in Bali or whatever. I figured, all right, cool, she's making friends. But then it started getting weird. Suddenly, she was talking about how we needed a nicer car, trendy outfits for the kids, and bags that cost more than our mortgage. At first I thought, maybe this is her way of showing love or trying to step up. But by the time the 5th Gucci bag landed in our closet, I was like, what the hell is going on? Is this a phase or some kind of shopping addiction? Things went downhill fast. Rent was late more than once, and I could see the credit card bills stacking up. Every time I tried to have a real talk about it, she'd hit me with, you don't get it. I'm doing this for us. Or, you don't understand what it takes to fit in as a mom these days. Like what? Since when did being a mom mean living like a Kardashian? It wasn't just the spending. It was the attitude. She seemed more focused on keeping up with her new squad than keeping us afloat. It came to the point where I'd come home from a 10-hour shift, exhausted, and instead of finding some peace, there'd be another Amazon package or a shopping bag with stuff we didn't need. I was struggling to even pay rent on time, and every conversation about it felt like hitting a brick wall. I'd tell her, Lisa, you've got to knock it off. We can't live like this. She'd roll her eyes and say, don't you want your family to have nice things? Or some other excuse about keeping up appearances. Then things got worse. Work slowed down, and my hours got cut. Money was tighter than ever, and I was scrambling just to keep the lights on. I'd try to talk to Lisa about cutting back, but she acted like it wasn't her problem. Don't you want us to enjoy life? She'd snap. Of course I wanted us to enjoy life, but how are we supposed to do that if we couldn't even afford the basics anymore? I wasn't asking for the world, just for her to ease up on the unnecessary spending. I thought it was reasonable to expect her to pitch in by cutting back, at least while we were struggling. It felt like I was carrying the weight of the world alone. No support, no understanding, just her piling on more stress. I thought maybe she'd step up. Maybe we'd face the rough patch together. That's what partners do, right? Nope. So, one night, the doomed night, I woke up and realized Lisa wasn't next to me. My first thought, midnight snack raid. My second thought, maybe she finally got that 3 a.m. explore the world bug she always joked about. Turns out it wasn't a joke. The house was dead silent. No lights on, no sounds, just me in a dark room. That's when I saw it. A folded piece of paper on her pillow. I sat there for a second, staring at it like it was going to explain everything. My heart was pounding. I unfolded it, and the first line was, Jake, I need to do this for me. She wrote about how I was holding her back, how she'd met someone who could help her explore the world, and how this was something she'd always wanted. She said she wished she didn't have to hurt me or the kids, but sometimes you have to leave behind the things that keep you small. Then came the part that really got me. I'll be back in a few years. By then, I'll have experienced the life I've always dreamed of, and we can pick up where we left off. I read it over and over, trying to make it make sense. She was leaving us. For another guy. For some fantasy of living the high life. A few years? Pick up where we left off? Like our lives were just some paused movie waiting for her to come back? I couldn't breathe. My hands were shaking as I reread the note, trying to convince myself it wasn't real. But it was. Lisa had left me and our kids for, what? Some delusion of a better life? I started spamming her phone, but it went straight to voicemail. I called again and again, but nothing. I woke the kids up. I don't even know why. Maybe I thought if they called, she'd pick up. But no. They tried too, and it all went straight to voicemail. My son, who was 12 at the time, looked up at me with these confused eyes and said, "Is mommy gone? Did something happen to her?" And my daughter, she was only 8, asked, "Is mommy in heaven?" That question hit me like a truck. I didn't know what to say. How do you explain to your kids that their mom just walked out on them? I ended up stammering something about how she was going away for a while, but nothing about it felt right. At that point, I started spamming her phone every few minutes. I'd pick up my phone and try calling her again, hoping she'd answer and tell me it was all some horrible joke, but the only thing I got was her voicemail. By morning, the reality started to sink in. Lisa was gone, and she wasn't coming back. Not anytime soon, anyway. I had 2 kids who needed me, and I had no idea how I was going to explain to them why their mom decided we weren't enough for her. That note became a turning point for me. At that moment, I stopped being a husband and started being something else. A man who had to figure out how to keep his family together, even when the person who was supposed to be my partner decided we weren't worth sticking around for. It's crazy how one piece of paper can change your whole life. Ever since that night, everything felt like a blur. I'd wake up, look at the empty spot on the bed, and wonder if it was all some weird nightmare. The first few months were a grind. I was trying to juggle work, bills, and raising 2 kids on my own. Before, I had someone to help, even if Lisa wasn't exactly the most hands-on mom. Now, it was all me. Packing lunches, helping with homework, cleaning up spills. It felt like I was drowning in responsibilities. I'd fall into bed every night completely wiped, only to wake up and do it all over again. Money was tight too. Lisa's spending had drained most of our savings, and with just my income, it felt like I was constantly one step away from falling behind. Every little expense felt like a crisis. I constantly sat there wondering how the hell I was going to make it all work. It reached a point where I almost gave up, but I knew my kids were there waiting for me to be there for them. So I decided to get my shit together. So I stopped feeling sorry for myself and started making moves. I cut out anything unnecessary. If it wasn't keeping the lights on or food on the table, it was gone. I also started hustling. I picked up every overtime shift I could get and even started freelancing on the side. Nights when I'd normally crash, I was up late working. It wasn't easy. There were times I thought I was going to drop from exhaustion, but little by little, I started to see the results. I sold off anything we didn't need or use. That fancy coffee maker Lisa had to have? Gone. The treadmill collecting dust in the corner? Sold it. It felt good, honestly, like I was taking control again. At home, I made sure the kids were taken care of. I cooked every meal, found secondhand clothes for them, and planned little outings, trips to the park, movie nights. Ben and Ellie, they were tougher than I ever gave them credit for. Sure, they missed their mom and bedtime was rough for a while, but they started to adjust. One night, about 6 months after Lisa left, Ben came into my room holding a picture of her. He handed it to me and asked, "Do you think she'll ever come back?" Man, that question hit hard. I sat there staring at the picture. Back then, life felt so simple, like we were just your average happy family. I wanted to tell him she'd come back, that everything would go back to normal, but I couldn't lie to him. "I don't know, buddy," I said, "but no matter what, I'm here. We're gonna be okay." Over time, things started to shift. It wasn't that life got easier, far from it, but it became manageable. I wasn't drowning anymore. No more surprise shopping sprees, no more arguments about money. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. And it wasn't just the money. I started to feel like myself again. I took pride in how far we'd come, how much I'd been able to rebuild after everything fell apart. I wasn't just getting by, I was standing up, stronger than before. And while I'd never planned to do this alone, I was proving to myself that I could. By the time a year had passed, I realized something. I didn't miss her. I missed the idea of her, sure, but the person who left that note, I didn't recognize her anymore. That's when I knew I couldn't keep dragging this around with me. When Lisa left, I thought, well, there's no handbook for this. Turns out the handbook is called a lawyer. I explained the situation and filed for divorce. That felt weirdly liberating, like unsubscribing from a newsletter you didn't even sign up for. Since Lisa was nowhere to be found, the process was quick and easy. It wasn't like I wanted things to reach that far, but it was the right thing to do. I sold the house, a place that had started to feel like a museum of bad memories, and moved us to a smaller place in a quieter town. Lisa had hated the idea of moving somewhere less flashy, but I didn't care anymore. I was done living for her. Our new home wasn't much, just a little 2-bedroom house on the edge of town, but it felt like a fresh start, and the kids adjusted faster than I expected. By the time 3 years had passed, Lisa was like a distant memory, at least for me. For Ben and Ellie, it took a little longer. There were still moments when I'd have them asking small questions about her, but they stopped expecting answers. It was like they understood in their own way that she wasn't coming back. Life had settled into something that felt normal, even if it wasn't the life I'd imagined. I had my routines down, and I started noticing something strange around that time. Freedom. Not the kind where you're running off to do whatever you want, but the quiet kind. Without Lisa constantly draining my bank account or filling the house with her demands, I had room to breathe. I wasn't living paycheck to paycheck anymore, and I could actually save a little. Without Lisa's constant chaos, I started realizing how much lighter life could be. I wasn't tiptoeing around her moods, dodging her spending sprees, or trying to keep up with her never-ending quest for more. Ben and Ellie seemed to notice it too. They started smiling more, laughing more. Watching them thrive reminded me that Lisa leaving wasn't the tragedy I'd once thought it was. It was the reset we didn't know we needed. In fact, I also changed. I wasn't the same guy I'd been when Lisa left. I was sharper, more confident, and focused. A year after the divorce, I started thinking about the future in a way I hadn't before. Not the what if Lisa comes back kind of future, but one where I wasn't looking over my shoulder for the next disaster. I wanted to give my kids a sense of stability, maybe even a family again. When it came to the dating scene apps, swipes, profiles, it was easy to find women reaching out to me, starting conversations, trying to catch my attention. But I wasn't chasing anything. I wasn't looking for someone to complete me or fill a gap. I wanted a partner who could keep up with me, someone who matched my energy and understood my priorities. But I wasn't looking for a quick fix or some grand romance. I wanted someone who fit into the life I'd built, someone who understood where I was coming from and wasn't trying to change me. Eventually, I reconnected with the woman from the bookstore. Her name was Emily, and she was everything Lisa wasn't. Grounded, kind, and completely uninterested in flashy things. She didn't care about appearances or keeping up with anyone. She cared about books, her dog, and being herself. We started out as friends, talking about everything from parenting to our favorite books. I was cautious. I didn't want to rush into anything, but over time, something clicked. Emily became someone I looked forward to seeing, someone who made me feel like I could be myself, without worrying about being judged. For Ben and Ellie, it was an adjustment. They were hesitant at first, but Emily never tried to force anything. She let them come to her in their own time, and eventually, they did. By the time we started officially dating, they adored her. I didn't rush into introducing her to the rest of my life. It wasn't about replacing Lisa or erasing the past. It was about building something new, something better. Looking back, that time in my life was a turning point. I went from just surviving to actually living. And while Emily played a part in that, it wasn't about her. It was about finally letting go of Lisa's shadow. The freedom I'd found wasn't just financial or emotional. It was the freedom to imagine a life where I wasn't defined by Lisa's choices, a life where I could make my own. Then, one afternoon, my phone rang, and I almost didn't pick up because I didn't recognize the number. But something made me grab it. When I saw the caller ID, I froze. It was Lisa. For a second, I just stared at the screen like it might explode. I hadn't heard from her in 6 years. Not a call, not a text, nothing. And now, out of nowhere, she was calling me? Part of me wanted to ignore it, but I still shared kids with her, so I answered. The moment I said, "Hello?" she launched into full panic mode. "Jake, what the hell is going on? Who are these people in our house?" she yelled. At first, I had no idea what she was talking about. "What house?" I asked. "Our house," she snapped, like I was supposed to know. "I came back, and there are strangers living there." That's when it clicked. She was talking about the old house, the one I'd sold years ago after the divorce. I couldn't help it. I almost laughed. "Lisa, we don't own that house anymore. It's been sold for years. That's their house now." She went silent for a second, then started yelling again. "Why would you sell our home without telling me? You had no right to do that." I could feel my blood boiling, but I kept my voice calm. "There's no hour anymore. You left, Lisa. You walked out on us and didn't look back. I didn't owe you anything." She started yelling at me, full-on shouting, demanding to know why I would sell our home without her permission. I wasn't about to let her guilt trip me, so I just said, "You weren't here, Lisa. You left. I don't owe you anything." That shut her up for about 2 seconds before she sighed dramatically, like she was the victim in all of this, and said, "Fine. What's your new address? I need to come home and give my husband and kids a big kiss." I actually laughed at that, not even trying to hide it. "Lisa," I said, "we're not yours anymore. I'm remarried. My wife and I, along with the kids, have moved on. You don't have a home here." She went dead silent for a moment, and I could almost hear the gears in her head turning. Then, Out of nowhere, she hit me with, "So you're telling me you cheated on me?" That one floored me. Cheated? Seriously, Lisa. You left us. You walked out, left a note, and vanished for 6 years. You don't get to call this cheating. You abandoned your family. She completely lost it. She started yelling about how I was heartless and how I had ruined her life. I stayed calm and told her the truth, even though I knew she wouldn't want to hear it. Lisa, you're the one who ruined everything. In the 6 years you've been gone, we've had to rebuild, and we realized we don't need you anymore. You made that decision for us the day you left. She doubled down, saying I had no right to move on without her, like she was entitled to pick up where she left off whenever she felt like it. Then, and I kid you not, she said, "What's your address? I need to come and teach you a lesson." I couldn't help it. I let out a dry laugh. Teach me a lesson? Lisa, are you serious right now? You've got some nerve, she shot back. Selling our home? Moving on? You think you can just erase me like that? Erase you, I said, trying to keep my cool. Lisa, you erased yourself when you walked out on us. You think you can just show up after 6 years and start calling the shots again? I'm your wife, she practically shouted. Were, I corrected. I admit I was playing on her nerves, but I enjoyed it. You were my wife. That ended the day you left. Now I have a new wife, and the kids and I have moved on. You don't get to come back here acting like this. She scoffed. Oh, so you think this is all just fine? That I'm going to sit back while you ruin everything? Give me your address, or are you too much of a coward? I finally said, Lisa, I'm not giving you my address. This isn't your home anymore. We don't owe you anything. You'll regret this, she hissed. I'll make sure of it. And then she hung up, just like that. She thought she had the last word. But honestly, I was just relieved the call was over. I just stood there for a moment, staring at the phone. Like, what was she even thinking? It's been 6 years. She walked out on us. And now, she thinks she can just come back in and act like nothing's changed? Unbelievable. I called Ben and Ellie into the living room and sat them down. I told them their mom had called and asked if they wanted to have a relationship with her. I wanted to give them the choice. It wasn't my place to make that decision for them. Their reaction was immediate. Ben shook his head and said, No way. She left us, Dad. Why would I want to talk to her now? Ellie just looked at me and said, Do we have to? I told them they didn't have to do anything they didn't want to. I could see the relief on their faces, and it hit me how much Lisa's absence had shaped them. She wasn't the mom they remembered anymore. She was just a stranger? Well, Lisa wasn't one to let things go. A few days later, I got a call from one of her relatives. Her cousin, I think. They told me Lisa was furious and planning to come back to town. I didn't know what her endgame was, but it didn't matter. She wasn't walking back into our lives like nothing had happened. The thing is, Lisa had this way of twisting reality to suit her narrative. She didn't see herself as the person who abandoned her family. In her mind, she was the victim, the one who'd been wronged. But that wasn't my problem anymore. I had a new life, one I wasn't willing to compromise for her drama. Now with Lisa in the picture again, everything turned into chaos, as if 6 years of silence wasn't enough drama. After our phone call, I thought maybe she'd realize she wasn't welcome and leave us alone. But no, Lisa doubled down. She started calling and texting nonstop, leaving these rambling voicemails about how I'd betrayed her and how she deserved to be part of our lives again. At first, I ignored her, but then things escalated. She even called once while I was at work. I picked up because I was tired of the constant interruptions. You think you can just replace me? She snapped the second I answered. Lisa, what do you want? I asked, trying to keep my cool. What do I want? I want my family back, she shouted. You had no right to move on without me. We were supposed to pick up where we left off. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Pick up where we left off? I yelled. Lisa, you walked out on us. You left a note, disappeared, and didn't look back for 6 years. You don't get to show up now and act like nothing happened. She scoffed like I was the unreasonable one. I told you I'd be back. You should have waited for me. That's what families do. They stick together. Families also don't abandon each other. I shot back. You didn't care about us when you left, and we don't owe you anything now. That's when she started throwing accusations. She claimed I was trying to erase her, that I'd brainwashed the kids against her, and that I'd cheated by remarrying. She even had the audacity to say, I hope your new wife knows she's living in my shadow. I hung up after that. There was no point arguing with her. But she wasn't done. She started spreading rumors among her extended family, saying I'd stolen her house and kept the kids from her. Thankfully, her relatives weren't buying it. Then came the legal threats. She claimed we were still married, and announced that she was planning to have my marriage to Emily annulled. Can you believe that? She acted like she could throw the reverse Uno card in my life because it didn't fit her narrative. Apparently, she thought the divorce didn't count, because she hadn't been there to contest it. I couldn't help but laugh when I heard that one. Like she could just skip out for 6 years, then pop back in and declare the whole thing null and void. She was acting like the world had been on pause while she was gone, as if everything would be exactly how she left it, just waiting for her to pick back up whenever she felt like. The sheer audacity of it all was mind-blowing. Lisa was so caught up in her own delusions that she genuinely thought her absence wouldn't change anything. That's not how the legal system or life works. I had the paperwork to prove the divorce was finalized, and she'd been notified through every legal channel possible back then. But apparently, ignoring reality was her specialty. She was throwing around big legal terms and acting like she had some sort of case, which was laughable considering she abandoned us and had no leg to stand on. Emily and I talked it over, and honestly, we weren't even worried, just annoyed. Lisa's threats felt more like a tantrum than anything real, but it didn't make them any less irritating. I sent her a firm message through my lawyer, reminding her that our divorce was legally finalized years ago, and that she had no claim over my life or my family. I thought that would shut her down, but Lisa wasn't one to go quietly. Around this time, Lisa went full-on crazy mode. I guess when she realized I wasn't biting on her calls and messages, she decided to go after Emily instead. Lisa had somehow gotten her number, don't even ask me how, and had sent her this long chain of unhinged texts. Stuff like, "You think you can just take my place? You'll never be their real mom. You're nothing to them." And another one that said, "Jake is mine, and you'll never change that. Don't think for a second this is over." I was seeing red. Like, who does that? Emily didn't sign up for this crap. But Lisa wasn't done. She started spreading rumors about Emily around town, telling anyone who'd listen that Emily was a homewrecker and that she'd stolen me. It was laughable, honestly, but it still pissed me off. I wasn't about to let her keep pulling this crap. The next day, I went straight to my lawyer and filed for a restraining order. Lisa was officially out of chances. Of course, she didn't take it lying down. She kept trying to stir up trouble, but at least the restraining order gave me some leverage to shut her down. By the time Lisa's attempts to force her way back into our lives had run their course, I was done. Completely done. I tried to shut her off in every way possible. At some point, the calls stopped. The messages dried up. Maybe she finally realized there was no getting through to me, or maybe she just moved on to her next scheme. Either way, the silence was a relief. For the first time in years, I didn't have to deal with her constant chaos, and I could focus entirely on my family and the life I'd rebuilt. It was like a weight had been lifted. A reminder that she no longer had any power over me or my choices. After a few months, life was finally calm. I was thriving at work, the kids were doing great, and Emily and I had built a life I was proud of. It was during a work dinner, one of those formal networking events where you shake hands, make small talk, and hope the food is at least edible. I'd been invited as a guest of honor for some project I'd led, and everything was going smoothly until she showed up. Lisa. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. She was there, dressed to the nines, hanging off the arm of my boss. My heart dropped. Of all the places she could have appeared, why here? I wasn't sure if she'd seen me yet, so I kept my cool, staying polite and professional. But of course, Lisa wasn't one for subtlety. The moment her eyes locked on mine, she froze, then plastered on this fake smile like she hadn't ghosted me and the kids for 6 years. She walked over, dragging my boss with her, and started laying it on thick. "Jake, wow, I had no idea you'd be here." Her voice dripped with fake enthusiasm. I didn't say a word, just nodded politely and turned back to my conversation. She didn't like that. "Aren't you going to introduce me?" she asked loudly, trying to pull attention. I still didn't bite. Instead, I excused myself, grabbed my jacket, and made my way toward the exit. That's when it happened. Lisa lost it. "Really? You're just going to walk away?" she yelled, loud enough for half the room to turn and stare. "You think you can just erase me from your life, Jake? I am your life." Her outburst was so loud, it stopped me in my tracks. For a moment, I considered responding, putting her in her place right there in front of everyone. But then I looked around, my boss, my colleagues, strangers, and realized it wasn't worth it. Instead, I turned to her and said calmly, "Lisa, this isn't the time or place. You need to leave." She started ranting about how I'd ruined her life, how I'd stolen her family, and how she deserved better than this. It was embarrassing, honestly. I could feel everyone's eyes on us, but I refused to stoop to her level. I just shook my head, turned back around, and walked out of the room. That night, as I sat at home with Emily and the kids, I realized how far I'd come. Lisa's outburst didn't faze me. It was just noise. The life I had now, the family I'd rebuilt, was all that mattered. Emily asked me what had happened at the dinner, And when I told her, she just laughed and said, "Sounds like she hasn't changed a bit." "Nope," I said, smiling. "But I have. Because that's the truth. I'm not the guy Lisa left behind all those years ago. I've grown. I've built something real, something solid. And the best part? I've got the kind of family Lisa could never understand. A genuine one. Lisa's return might have been chaotic, but it reminded me of something important. I'm done with the past. My focus is on the people who truly matter, the ones who've stood by me through everything. And let me tell you, life's never been better. Thanks for sticking with me, guys. This journey's been a wild one, but I'm proud of where we've landed. Here's to new beginnings.